There was a point in time where Harambe memes became very racist. People were using Harambe and putting a really nasty twist on it, and I think that kind of put a sour note in a lot of the Harambe memes that were floating around out there, because then they just weren't funny anymore.
Gorillas were often portrayed in popular imagination as dangerous opponents to the established system, and have long been used in unexamined racism. Gorillas like King Kong steal women, or attack characters like Tarzan. The name Tarzan literally means white skin, furthering the racism of the time. This is the house of Tarzan, the killer of beasts and many black men. This is how Tarzan introduces himself to Jane in Tarzan of the Apes. Later in the book, he rescues Jane from a black ape rapist.
In this case, the mother is neither reckless nor negligent.
Had she been in the bathroom smoking crack and let her kids run around the zoo, that'd be a different story.
All right. Hey, everybody, coming in a little bit late there. We wanted to start off with a clip from the movie talking about the very troublesome racist past of zoos. Now, the reason we started with that clip and why are we talking about racism? We're talking about Harambe. Why are we talking about racism? Well, the problem is the history of the zoos mixed in with the treatment of this mother lead to a very uncomfortable conversation, one that has a bigger context, at least within American society, but worldwide as well. And it's one that really is important that we take a look at. So today is a very different type of show because we want to talk about human zoos. Now, in order to talk about human zoos, let's just take it back a quick heartbeat real fast. Excuse me. Racism, and I want to hear everyone's opinion on this. It's a very important topic. It's a very difficult topic. The more we talk about it, the more we can discuss it. My view and my experience is that racism is systemic and built in to the system. For example, let's just talk about exploiting things we don't understand. We do that today with zoos, but we used to do that with people. Now, there used to be race theory, and they used to actually believe that like measuring the heads of different people, and their skulls led to some kind of a scientific proof of some form that, one race was superior to another. It's absolute baloney, as we all know, and has been disproved several times, but it was the modern way of thinking at the time. Now, we have to remember that behind that concept, that within the species, much less, extending kindness to other species, within our own species, we were trying to make classifications about what's better within the species. So automatically, this concept of this dominance comes forth in the zoo world because the zoo begins with exhibiting the human zoos. Now, if you guys have seen the movie, you'll know that Carl Hagenbach was one of the first people to produce wild exotic animals for zoos, and he also was the first one to create the human zoos and make them so popular at the time, very much stalking them. So the very first human zoo actually was at the Paris World Fair in 1878, and there was 400 natives, as they would have called them back then. Now, this comes into a bigger thing. We have to remember that this was the time where the idea of an explorer was somebody that wore a tan jungle outfit went to where the natives, quote unquote, live and saw something unusual to the white experience. The perspective of all of this comes from the white experience. And that's what we have to remember when we're talking about Tarzan, we're talking about all this other stuff. None of this stuff is unusual unless it comes from the white perspective, which is been the dominant perspective for a long time. Now that's starting to change. But now as an entire species, maybe we can afford the same form of respect to other inhabitants on Earth as well. Now that we've learned to start to offer it to each other. So this was the very first World Fair in America in 1904. This was the Louisiana Purchase, just to give you a little bit of historical context. This is the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in photographs. Now, the reason that I brought this one up is because this is Mr. Odebenge. Now, Odebenge was brought to the World Fair in 1904 to be exhibited. And he wasn't alone. They had exhibits from everything. This is the Philippine exhibition. Now, notice they're just like trying to make it seem like, wow, these crazy, wild people. You know, this is at the World Fair, by the way. This is 1904. This is in St. Louis. This is not legitimate or real. That was just in St. Louis. Now, what happened was you had all these exhibits. I believe this was, this was a different. So this was at Brussels. Now, Brussels has a long history of this as well, because we have to remember that Brussels owned the Congo for a while. So this resulted in a lot of exploitation. As a matter of fact, here's an image of the Belgium that Odebenge grew up in. This is a place where people were often, routinely, as you can see here, the hands were chopped off for not working hard enough by the Belgian rulers. It was a very brutal, oppressive slave time. These people were then sold into slavery and sent over, and that's where Odebenge comes from. And after Odebenge was at the World Exhibit, he was sent to the Bronx Zoo, where he lived inside of an ape exhibit with monkeys. It's really hard to talk about this stuff. It's hard to believe that we ever had this allowed in our past. Sierra says, I was absolutely shocked at every turn when we were researching the history of the zoo. Absolutely. The human zoo is an unexpected turn. And we didn't know there was human zoos. But when the zoos today tell us that they are good intentioned and they're here to save the world, let's remember that, including the Cincinnati Zoo, zoos have had human zoos for over 100 years now. Carol Borden says, Manifest Destiny brought all this hell to the place we live called America, and with it, all the hell that came with it. Absolutely. White people thinking that somehow it was their world to take and control. Now, this is where the problem really comes in. This concept of domination and colonialism was everywhere. As a matter of fact, even in Barnum and Bailey Circus here, you can see in this ad, this is these animals. Look at this giraffe and this insane. All these animals are in these little teeny cages. This poster is supposed to encourage you to go to this, and you can see the human zoo in the background. You can see the people in the background. You can see the the fact that they're not human. There's something different, and we're going to take care of them for you. Now, again, this is a time where all of this was being done. There was, as we took a look in the movie, we saw Tarzan. Unfortunately saw a lot of racist imagery as well from Dr. Seuss, and that is a shocking thing, but there is a lot of racist imagery in Dr. Seuss. Here is an image from Tarzan, and this gives you an idea. This is off Twitter. This will give you an idea of the type of of representation of anybody that was not white back in the day. So when we take this colonial idea, that we own the things, white people, manifest destiny, like Carol said, and a lot of other issues that allowed white colonialism to expand across the globe. They started to enslave a lot of other cultures that were there, which then led to exhibiting these cultures as if they were wild animals. Now, a lot of people were not happy about this. And when it comes to Odebenge, people spoke up. People tried to get it stopped. But ultimately, Odebenge took his own life after being put on display like this forever and forever. Now, I don't want to necessarily equate Odebenge to an animal because that is what these zoo people did. It's totally different. But one thing that is not different is the colonial mentality of superiority that allowed this to happen. It allowed white people to enslave other people for centuries and centuries. And we've stopped that and we're doing better. I think as an entire world said, no, we're not going to allow this anymore. Next step is to extend this kindness to other animals. But we have a lot of racism to overcome still within our culture, within our society, within our system. And this is the biggest problem, but they said no to the human zoos, and that is a huge step. Now, I can't believe that they are they're not as far back as we would be comfortable wishing they were. They should. This story should be from 300 years ago, right? But it isn't. It's from about 100 years ago, maybe 150 at the most. So it is still there. We know people that were alive that potentially could have been to this, to these events, or if not, at least their parents potentially have gone to this 1904 in America human zoos. And then we have to remember Cincinnati Zoo and all the other zoos had human components. Now, why do we talk about this? Well, if this is the history of the zoo, this shows that we have a comfortability with allowing the exploitation of something that looks different than us, whatever that may be. Appallingly, that was people, and appallingly, that is still animals to this day. Now, why do we bring it back? Because it comes back to people again. The mother that was involved in the Harambe incident, people went after her. It was like a crazy mob that went after her and said, make her, give her charges. She's responsible. She's the reason we lost Harambe. Everyone was mad they lost Harambe, and rightly so, but at the wrong person. This mother was no different than any other mother that had been there and any other mother whose child had fallen into other exhibits. One was in the UK. It was a white family, and there were no repercussions. And the other one was in Chicago, and that was a white family. There were no repercussions. The story there was, oh, thank goodness the child is safe and returned to the mom. The story in Harambe was, let's destroy the mom. She is the problem. Now, remind yourselves that, remind everybody you talk to, the mom was not found legally responsible for any of this, but the zoo was, for not having an adequate gate. The zoo did not have an adequate barrier. That's why the child fell in. It's not because of the mom. Now, we ask everybody, what do you think? How do you think racism played into the international and national reaction and local reaction to what happened that day to Harambe? We're really curious to see what you think, because racism has been, unfortunately, systemically part of many, many cultures for a long time, but it's also systemically been part of the zoo industry for a very long time. And if they're willing to exploit anything they can for a buck, we know the animals are not going to be having any positive changes anytime soon unless we demand a little bit more. So today's a very difficult topic, but we wanted to go through the fact human zoos exist. They exist around the world. America is part of it. We were part of this. Don't forget, the Bronx Zoo had an African villager in an ape display. And it was so cruel, he ended up killing himself from the experience, even after he was freed. He didn't kill himself in there. He was freed and killed himself. So this is what captivity does to everybody, but it's also what desensitizes us to caring about everybody around us. The only way we're going to change is if we start caring and start thinking with our hearts a little bit more. So thank you for joining us today. I would love to know your thoughts. A very, very, very complicated topic that we'd love to hear what your thoughts are on. Carol says, no one should go to the zoos and aquariums to watch animals of all kinds suffer for human entertainment. I'm not entertained, and this is not progress. Carol, I agree 100%. I agree 100%. The entire concept of putting something behind bars into captivity and forcing its day-to-day schedule behind the scenes so that people think they're being entertained. If people knew the truth about how animals were treated in zoos, they would not go. And that is our job. What we're trying to do now is to teach everybody that loves animals to learn about what's really happening with the zoos. And remember, the more they talk about how much they're doing this for the animals, remember that they are not. They're doing this for their ticket sales. And that's that. And they always have. Human zoos are one of the biggest embarrassments of our modern society. And we can't let them be forgotten because it is the history of the zoo. And that history is problematic. And the zoo's present is problematic. And potentially the zoo's future will be problematic for many of the animals that will be born into captivity. So again, thank you for joining us today. This is a very difficult topic. Please let us know, what are your thoughts on, do you think the mom was overly blamed due to racism? Do you think everybody reacted because of racism? Do you think they reacted because they were angry about Harambe? And what do you think about the history of racism? Also, what do you think about Tarzan and racism? When you think about Tarzan, do you think about it as being racist? So let's talk about the human zoos. Let's talk about the zoos we have today. And let's talk about how racism has shaped not only the zoo industry, but the societal reaction to everything that happens there. So thanks for joining today. I can't wait to see more comments. I can't wait to hear more about what everybody has to say. Thank you, Carol, for joining us today. And Sierra, as always, to be here with us to help bring more information to us and keep our stories up and moving. As Sierra has up here, there were 2 other incidents similar to Harambe, and the other 2 families were white, and they did not face the same reaction. So please let us know what you think about everything. And thank you again for joining us. Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Sierra. Thank you for everybody that's stopping by. Can't wait to hear your comments, conversations. Let's keep this conversation going. It's the only way we can make a change for the future. Sending you all the best for today, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow as we talk a little bit more about many aspects surrounding the zoo and the zoo then, the zoo now, and the zoo of the future. Have a